Hey, what's up, party people? It's your old pal F here, and it's time for another edition of F Bombs, being brought to you as per usual with absolutely zero preparation, zero production values, and no thought put into what I'm going to say at all. Apart from the fact that I pulled you fine folks on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, the source of everyone's misery, um, about what I should talk about next. And pardon me, I can already tell that my voice is crappy, so just gonna get some water. By the way, this is my sort of personalized water bottle. Anyway, polled you guys on Twitter X and asked what I should talk about today, and by golly, Zim won. I guess potentially by a landslide because I think it was like almost 60% over Fairly Odd Parents and My Life as a Teenage Robot, which each got 20 something percent. But fear not. I will do a video about both those things eventually. And I'm probably going to do more videos about Zim. I mean, that's a thing. There are many, many, many stories to tell about my time on Invader Zim, so I'm just going to kind of cover some of the basics, some of the stuff that I haven't discussed elsewhere. But boy, by golly, if you follow me on Twitter at Fountain Cartoon, I have, and if you do a search, I've done many, many posts on Zim, and I have talked about it. There's artwork up. So, make no mistake, if you find this incredibly unsatisfying, there's more material that you can find if you follow me on Twitter. And if you do decide to follow me on Twitter as a result of this video, please reach out and say hi. I very much like to hear from you folks. So anyway, before I get down to talking about Invader Zim, one of the reasons I do these videos at all, it is not because I love looking at my face in the QuickTime movie recording window. It's because at this channel, we are making new, original, and 100% free for you cartoons. And the thing of it is, we're Fountain's Pen Productions, and we are creating Fountain's Pen cartoons. And I have a team of independent animators from all over the world who are working night and day, just working their tails off. And I'm mentoring them as we go along to make, brand new cartoon content. And the thing of it is, we want to get this channel really sort of moving and shaking by the time we start to premiere the cartoons. Now, if you check below, we've already got a teaser trailer for our first cartoon that's going to premiere called Flotchy, Notchy, and Tip. But in addition to that, we've got little mini short cartoons, and we've got all kinds of crazy cool stuff planned. But the thing of it is, because our stock in trade is very, very short cartoons, we're having a hard time building up our watch hours. And in order to get this channel monetized in any kind of meaningful way, we've got to reach, I don't know, I think it is 80 bajillion watch hours at this point. But the point is, everyone at Fountain's Pen Cartoons is doing it for the love of the craft. None of us is getting paid, but I've made the solemn pledge that if this channel ever starts to make money, that I will be the absolute last person to get paid. I am eager to pay the people who are working so hard on these cartoons, and if I were in a position to do so just out of my own pocket, I would. But as it is, the only sort of payment I have to offer is one-on-one mentorship and one-on-one sort of teaching on how to make cartoons. Now, that's not nothing, but I would really love to be able to, throw these folks some dough. And the only way to get around to doing that is to monetize this channel. And we're looking for other avenues as well, via advertising and via merchandise and all that sort of thing. But the most significant way of doing that is to get this channel monetized. We've got the minimum number of subscribers, but now we've got to get the minimum number of watch hours. And since we make short cartoons, it's getting really hard to rack that up with what we've got locked and loaded. So I make these as a way to give you something sort of more long form to watch, that'll hopefully get us to our goal. So please, 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 now that you're here watching this on Fountain's Pen Cartoons, please like, share, subscribe, but please watch these videos. Even if you just set them on your phone and leave them running with the sound down if you don't want to hear my voice, and who can blame you for that? But what's important is that we get these watch hours, and I try to make these as entertaining as I possibly can. But the reason I don't put more sort of production value into all this nonsense is because I try and, put my real efforts into making the actual cartoons. So this is just a kind of down and dirty look behind the scenes where you sit down with your crazy old Uncle F and you hear a story about his years from the animation industry. So that's all this is. But this is here to help support the real thing that we're doing, which are the original cartoons. So please, 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 mention us on every bit of social media you can, grasp onto. Send all your friends, all your family, send everybody to this page. Have them like, share, and subscribe. And please watch these videos so that we can meet our goals and get to a point where I can actually start throwing some people some monetary compensation for what they're doing. All right, thank you for listening to that. And with that out of the way, let's talk about Invader Zim. So, Invader Zim was in development and gearing up at Nickelodeon at a time that I'd already managed to finagle my way into Nickelodeon while it was happening. And the thing of it is, years before, I had become acquainted with Jonan Vasquez's work via Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. A really small animation studio, a commercial studio that I worked for back in Michigan. One of the other artists that I worked with there, his name was Ken. I won't mention his full name because I don't know if he wants the attention. But he had a bunch of Jonan's work that he kept in the office. And he was like, oh, you got to read these, you got to read these. And I read them and just instantly loved them and became a huge fan of Jonan's work. And what struck me about Jonan's work, particularly his drawing style, was that I could tell he and I had a lot of the same influences. And we both had this affinity for really, really like dark black inks and scratchy lines and all these things. But while there were a few influences there, certainly, our actual drawing style certainly had its major differences, but there were definitely influences that we had in common, which made me attracted immediately to his work. And at the same time that I was reading his stuff, I was doing my own sort of independent comics that I was doing back in Michigan, and it was me and a bunch of other cartoonists that I had wrangled from around town, and we were self-publishing. And so, it was very clear, even though Jonan was with Slave Labor Graphics, it was clear that he had sort of come up through the ranks. And so it was very inspiring to see Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which just had that very kind of stream of consciousness, raw quality about it that I really liked. I mean, he would have the narrative of the story, but then he would have all these little comics that were just tangents, which, was very, not dissimilar at all to what we were trying to do as well. Because I'm a big fan of surrealism and Dadaism and just the, inherent joy of doing something that does not necessarily have any meaning and that is potentially very confusing for the viewer. See, that's a funny thing about me. A lot of people think that, my main goal in life is to make people laugh. But, if I'm being perfectly honest, what gives me the most amount of personal joy is not making people laugh, but making people confused. I think seeing people watch something and have them enjoy it, but then walk away from it going, what the hell did I just see, is very, very satisfying to me on some bizarre level that I can't really dissect at the moment. So anyway, So I was at Nickelodeon and I was working on Chalk Zone, but I'd seen all, some of the Invader Zim artwork start to pop up on the walls and stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's that guy. This is him. Wow, what is he doing at Nickelodeon? Given the fact that he had been doing Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, but I loved his work, so I was seeing it around and very intrigued that something was going on there. Um, and it was now by this time I'd been on Chalk Zone for a little while, and I'd gotten a little bit of mojo at Nickelodeon. Like I'd been doing storyboards and stuff for a lot of the Oh Yeah cartoons. I'd become acquainted with Butch Hartman and done a lot of his shorts, and I think by that time I may have done a Fairly Odd Parents storyboard. If not a Fairly Odd Parents storyboard, I think I'd done a storyboard for him for Dan Danger or one of his other Oh Yeah shorts. But the point is, I'd been at Nickelodeon for a while and sort of gotten a little traction in my career. So anyway, I had been working on Chalk Zone, and right around that time, when Zim got its actual, we're gonna do 6 episode pickup, it I discovered that the crew that they were bringing in was all people that I was really good friends with and had sort of gone to cartoon boot camp with over at Klasky Chupo. It was literally like a bunch of my friends who I had worked with either on the Wild Thornberries or who worked across the hall from me on Rugrats and stuff like that. So because the sort of co-executive producer Steve Russell had been a director at Klasky Chupo. And what's funny about that is Steve Russell was one of the directors on the Wild Thornberries, and he actually liked me. And at the time that I was working at Klasky Chupo, I had 2 directors that absolutely hated me. And the whole time I would go to him and I'd become chummy with him, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I have to do to make these guys happy, blah blah blah. And he's like, I keep telling him, let me take you, I'll take you. And Steve Steve I think always had a soft spot for people who didn't quite fit in like myself. So anyway, he was coming over along with some people who still to this day are some of my best friends, but they were absolutely my best friends for the whole time that I was in California, best friends in the industry, and the people that I had sort of relied on when I was working at Klasky Chupo, because when I got my job at Klasky Chupo, I had no idea what I was doing, and so I would go over to their cubicles, look over their shoulder, and be like, oh, okay, so that's how you do a storyboard. And these are people like Chris Graham, Ian Graham, Sean Murray. There's a handful of others, and I'm not going to name absolutely every single one of them. But also one of the people that I had met while I was at Klasky Chupo was a fella who was, I don't know if he was a PA or receptionist or what his deal was, but he was an office guy, and his name was Eric Trueheart. And I don't know how it is that we hit it off at Klasky Chupo, but we, I think we just had a good sort of rapport that went back and forth. And so he wound up coming over to Invader Zim as a writer. So all of a sudden, all these people that, like I said, I'd kind of gone to cartoon kindergarten with were there at Nickelodeon. And so for me, this was awesome because when I first got hired at Nickelodeon, I didn't know anybody there. Now, most of the people that I met were incredibly, incredibly nice, and I was making friends fast. But this was sort of as if, you had to change high schools in the middle of your sophomore year, and then suddenly all your friends from your old high school also had to change high schools and get sent to the same high school you had gone to. So it was really thrilling to suddenly have them all back in the building. And right out of the gate, Steve Russell, who was the one kind of instigating all this. And I should mention, bear in mind, before Steve Russell came along and before all these other guys came along, there was another crew that worked on Invader Zim and worked on this thing, the coveted, much talked about original Invader Zim pilot. They had done the pilot, and because they did the pilot, that's how they got the 6-episode pickup or 6-pack. So Steve coming on, he was coming on to replace the person that had directed the pilot and all that stuff. So it's not as though nothing had been done on Invader Zim prior to this, But in fact, speaking of the six pack, don't go anywhere. I promise. Stay right there. This is worth it. I should have grabbed this beforehand, but like I said, there's no preparation for this whatsoever. Invader Zim, along with Fairly Odd Parents and Chalk Zone, were picked up not for a full season of shows, but for 6 episodes. Because that's what Nickelodeon decided to do at the time. They were shying away from giving shows 24-episode pickups because that just got to be really, really pricey. And especially shows like Fairly Odd Parents and Chalk Zone and Invader Zim that were a little on the riskier side, they were only committing to 6 episodes. So around the studio, they were all referred to as the 6 packs. And that's why I have this autographed, and yes, my hands shake, autographed by Jonan Vasquez, Invader Zim beer. And I have a Fairly Odd Parents beer and a Chalk Zone beer. So, yeah. Anyway. So they had gotten their pickup for the 6 packs. Steve Russell had come on and had brought suddenly all my friends over. And you know, like I said, it was really delightful for me because suddenly all my pals were working in the same studio as me again. And right out of the gate, Steve Russell said to me, "You know, we never got to work at Klasky Chupo. Why don't you do storyboards for this? I'll hire you to do storyboards for Invader Zim." Now, folks, I am a guy who very consciously chooses never to look back with regret on decisions that I have made. I try to learn from mistakes that I've made, but I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on, oh, I should have done this, or oh, I should have done that, or whatever. This is one of the few occasions where, because my whole life philosophy is every decision that I've made has led me to where I am now, and for all of the, you know, trials and tribulations that I've been through, I'm very, very grateful, happy, satisfied with where I'm at now. So if I'd have taken another path, who knows if I'd have wound up where I am now. So Steve was like, why don't you be a storyboard artist on Invader Zim? And the thing is, I had heard that they were desperately looking for a new character designer. Like they had someone do it for the pilot, but for the most part, up till this point, Jonan had been doing all the character designs himself. And I had been hearing, you know, just through the grapevine that they've been having a really hard time finding a character designer. And I remember saying to Steve, you know what, I moved out to Los Angeles, and if you watch one of the other videos, I'll back up this assertion. I moved out to Los Angeles to get in animation to be a character designer. I never wanted to be a storyboard artist because doing storyboards is hard, directing is hard, it's all just hard. Whereas character design for me is really fun. It comes very naturally, very easily to me. So I was like, oh, Steve. And the thing is, I knew Steve was a great director, and I knew that I would learn a lot under him, but I needed a break from these freaking storyboards. And so I said, I don't want to do storyboards, I want to do character designs. And he was like, well, I'm not really, you know, if you can, I don't want to hire you to do character designs. I want to hire you to do storyboards. So if you want to get hired to do character designs, you need to talk to Jonan, which wound up being exactly what I did. I went to Jonan. I don't know how the introduction happened exactly, but I remember meeting him and immediately sort of thinking he was super nice. He seemed kind of exactly how I pictured him in my head from reading his comics and stuff. And, you know, I was like, you know, what do you think about letting me try out to be a character designer? And he's like, yes, absolutely. We're looking for someone. We've had a really hard time. We don't have anybody that I like so far. So he just very casually said to me, you know, here's the style of the show. He handed me the Bible. I looked through the Bible. It's like, this is the style. You know, do some character designs and bring it back to me. So these are some of the ones that I did. Just your typical background characters. And this just goes to show how little I knew about what was happening. I labeled this one Wimpy Zim or Alpha Zim, Like I didn't even know if Zim was the name of the species. I knew it was the name of the character, but then now this I find very interesting. Look who was there right from the very beginning. Our good friend Gretchen. Um, and then of course I had a really good time um, doing aliens and what have you. So this was my character design test that I turned into Jonan, and much to even my own surprise, he took a look at him, and I think really possibly the next day or within a couple days, got back to me, and he's like, "Yep, you're in." So that's how I got my first job as a character designer in the animation industry. And by that time, I had been doing storyboards and stuff for at least 2 or 3 years. So it had been 2 or 3 years in the industry before I finally get to do the thing that I've been wanting to do. So, so yeah, he hires me on, and suddenly I'm on a show with all of my best pals. Now the difference being that they're all storyboard artists and I'm the character designer, and I shouldn't have gone around saying this because I think it irritated everybody else, and who can blame them. But I would refer to my job as character designer on Invader Zim as my working vacation because it was so easy and fun. Like I would get a list every day that would go something like, alien, monster, zombie, robot, alien, monster, zombie, school kid, teacher, alien, robot, monster, zombie. And it was just so much fun that it didn't seem like work to me. And now the thing is, a lot of people look at the stuff that I draw in my own style, and they're like, "Oh, I can see you've been influenced by Invader Zim." And while that's absolutely unavoidably true, yeah, I've been influenced by every show I've ever worked on in some capacity. But the fact of the matter is, my drawing style was already similar to Jonan's before I even started. So, and I think that's the only reason I got the job was because he could tell there was something that I kind of naturally got that other people didn't get. Um, so right out of the gate, in addition to the robots and zombies and stuff like that, I would get assignments for literally it would say just like we need um, 50 generic school kids to use as background characters at school, and then it would be we need 50 just regular people to occupy the time. So that's the thing a lot of people don't probably realize about being a character designer in animation is that especially if you're on a creator driven show, which Invader Zim absolutely most certainly was. I mean, it was Jonan. Um, your job is number one. Your job is to make it look like he designed every single character. Like you're not really supposed to put that much of yourself into these designs. And like I said, that didn't bother me in the slightest because I liked his style and it was close enough to my own that I felt very much at home. But the idea is to make it look like he designed every single character. And then, in addition to that, the very, very main characters, all the main, stuff was done either by Jonan himself or he would do a rough sketch and then I would expand on it and create model sheets for it and stuff. So, and by the way, and obviously no one's paid me to say this, but this is a really good book. And it's got what I'm talking about, pages of what I'm talking about. And yes, my name is in here somewhere if you look really hard. But like, yeah, like for instance, that's my model sheet of Gur. And as far as I know, my model sheets were used, pretty much to the bitter end. I mean, I'm sure they got revised and expanded upon and all that sort of thing. But again, as a character designer, a lot of what you do is this. Just make armies and armies and armies of characters that are either specific to that episode or characters that can be recurring characters that are just always walking around in the background and stuff. So But now the fun part about that is that you do feel as though um, you're part of the world building. And shortly after I got hired, they actually I don't know how I lucked out so much on this show, but I actually they gave me what was called at the time, and he always should have had a much better title than this, but assistant character designer Aaron Alexevich, and I also got to have an intern in a year. So so I would do the rough designs, and then Aaron would clean them up, and they'd look 1,000 times better. But he and I, were kind of the character design team for that first season, with me being presumptively and ostensibly the lead character designer, with him as the assistant character designer. But one of the things that came out of that relationship almost instantly was that he and I would have a really good time coming up with backstories for every single character. It could have been a bumblebee. It could have been Invader Zim's neighbor. It could have been just any person you saw walking on the street. We would have a backstory for that person because we would draw them and go, oh yeah, this person's had a hard life, or oh, this girl was prom queen at her high school, but fell on a hard time. Like we would create all these backstories for all these characters that would maybe get 30 seconds of screen time throughout the course of the entire series. So but that was a blast. He and I would crack each other up just coming up with backstories for these characters, and he and I had a great time together on the show. But okay, so here's where things start to evolve. As Invader Zim is ramping up, so is Fairly Odd Parents, and as you may recall, I had already been doing some work for Butch Hartman, creator of Fairly Odd Parents, and he, I know he had wanted me to do storyboards on the first 6 episodes of the Fairly Odd Parents when he was gearing up. So for the first time ever, I had two productions kind of, that were sort of pulling for me that I could kind of choose from. But I kept telling Butch, I'm like, oh, it's so much fun on Zim, and it's so chill not having to do storyboards. Now, also right around this time, because I had been doing a bunch of Oh Yeah cartoons, I had pitched my own Oh Yeah cartoon, and this will be a whole other video someday. I pitched my own Oh Yeah cartoon called The Tantrum that got picked up, and not only got picked up, but got optioned as a series. So the minute that my Oh Yeah cartoon short was done, they were going to proceed with my short as an actual Nickelodeon pilot, and they were going to test it for a series pickup. So simultaneously, I'm doing freelance storyboards for Butch. I'm still doing wrapping up a few things with Chalk Zone. I'm working on my Oh Yeah Cartoons pilot, and I'm doing character designs for Invader Zim. And that's another reason that I wanted to do character designs as opposed to storyboards. Because if you've watched Invader Zim, you know that the animation and the storyboarding for that show are wildly complicated and wildly ambitious. Like those are feature quality storyboards. And keep in mind, this is all still pencils on paper. None of this was digital yet. So all those huge fight scenes and space battles and all that stuff, that was all pencil on paper. And that was a lot of work and took up a ton of time. So there's no way that I would have been able to continue doing boards for Chalk Zone and doing boards for Fairly Odd Parents, as well as producing, writing, directing, storyboarding, and character designs for my own show. So I had a lot going on. And of those things, the two most fun at the time were, of course, my own thing and Invader Zim. But it was also around this time, and this is another part of this whole story where I'm not particularly proud of myself. It was around this time that I had people from the upper tiers of Nickelodeon telling me over and over and over again, "Oh, you're going to be the next Butch Hartman. You're our next big creator." Because my cartoon pilot had been getting a lot of buzz, and everyone was super excited about what a big hit series it was going to be, and there was talk about how it would be sort of the perfect bridge show to go in between Fairly Odd Parents and Invader Zim. So, I was excited because my career was on the rise. I was having a blast on both shows, but I'm also quite certain that I let that get in the way of me doing. I don't want to say get in the way of doing my best work for Invader Zim, because I always loved my work on Invader Zim, and I always, uh, gave it my best. But there's kind of no denying that at a certain point it was secondary in my head to doing my own show. And that wasn't fair to any of them. That wasn't fair to Jonan. It wasn't fair to the show, and it would have been slightly better, except for the fact that, as a freshly plucked from his hometown Midwesterner, who seemed to be, hitting the big time within the first 5 years of his career, I was over the moon, and I'm quite certain that I was prancing around the studio day in and day out, talking about what a great time I was having, because everything was going so great for me. And now again, I don't think I have it in me to, run around and brag or be obnoxious about it, or at least it was never my intention to be obnoxious about it. But I am quite certain that while all this was going on, and I was talking about how great things are going, meanwhile, everybody else on Invader Zim is just running themselves ragged, just trying to get the show done. Because, like I said, it was this hyper ambitious show. They're all they're all suffering, and I'm doing cartwheels around the office about what a grand old time I'm having. So there were people on the show that didn't like that. There were people on the show that again, I admit it, and I have since copped to it and even apologized for it. I'm sure they found it obnoxious, and I feel badly about it. That is regret number two that I will point out. I wish I had been a little more diplomatic about that whole thing, and a little more sensitive to everybody else's feelings. But I had no idea. I was just clueless. I was a clueless, dumb corn shucker from Michigan. I had never worked in this kind of environment before, and I certainly was not expecting my career to take off as quickly as it did. And with all of the circumstances around it the way it did. I mean, 1 minute, 1 minute I'm working on animated CD-ROM games in Michigan, and the next minute I've not only got my own pilot in production, I'm working on a show with Jonan Vasquez. It was the hottest show. Oh my gosh, people were falling all over themselves trying to get jobs on Invader Zim. And there I was, the lead character designer. I was getting invited to industry events and being invited to speak and all this stuff. And so, I am quite certain that I let a fair amount of it go to my head. And like I said, I really don't have any recollection. Look, you can talk to anybody else who worked on the show, and they might tell you something differently. They might tell you that, yes, F was completely obnoxious, and we all hated him for it. But I don't think. I know I never intended to be obnoxious about it, and I know I never intended to make anybody, uncomfortable or annoyed with it. But I'm certain I did just out of sheer naivete. Um, so anyway, and that just added to the fact that working on Invader Zim for everybody but me seemed to be intensely stressful, and that's what happens when you create a show with that magnitude of ambition. Um, like I said, everyone was just working themselves ragged to create something that nobody had ever seen before. And by golly, they did it. There's no getting around it. They absolutely did it. And now, again, before I paint myself in too horrible of a picture, like I said, yes, I was distracted, and yes, I should have been paying closer attention to my colleagues, but I did do some of the best designs of my life on that show. Like this one, I've always been super duper proud of. That was for the Halloween episode, and you can obviously see my Clive Barker influences here. This is one of my absolute favorite monsters I've ever created. The Tongue Walker. The idea is that he does not have good eyesight, but he has good hearing, and his main source of sensory perception are his tongues, and he walks on them. And then, of course, here's Iggins, and this crazy dude. Yeah, I mean, again, I could have been more focused and I could have been more diplomatic, but I am proud of the work that I did. This this was one of the first ones where we were, it started to become apparent that putting the characters in big ridiculous costumes was a heck of a lot of fun, and there was it was obvious that there was no turning that around. I'm trying to look for something specific. Oh yeah, here's some of the real treasures of my of what I did there. For Polonius Maximus, I would often do a design. Uh, th- th- that's that's my design there, and then Jonan would correct it. That's Jonan's drawing, so that's an original Jonan drawing right there. And what's funny about these designs, and I've got tons of these too, where he writes me little notes like "This is horrible, I hate it," etc., etc. But what's funny is, if you look at the top, this is my handwriting, because at the time there was no official Invader Zim production stationery, so I created stationery with 4 boxes. Check the box that applies. Yes, clean it up, then bring it back. No, I hate this, destroy it. Or maybe work with it and resubmit, or other. And then Jonan would write his notes there. And that wound up being, as far as I know, the official like Invader Zim stationery for character designs throughout the life of the show. Which whenever I see, I mean, I think by the end of, I don't know, season 2.5, I'm still fuzzy on how many official seasons the show had. I'm sure they switched it over at some point, and once it gets down to cleanup and inking, they did have stationery and all that, but for the longest time that was the stationery with my chicken scratch handwriting. Another thing that wound up happening really early on is Nickelodeon at the time, as a physical studio, as a place of work, was really super cool. Like, it looked like a cartoon studio, and it felt like a cartoon studio when you walked in there. And one of the things that they boasted was that they had a miniature golf course, and all of the various holes around the miniature golf course were based on their shows. Well, and now of course they've got this whole new swath of shows coming through, and so they wanted golf holes that would be designed after their new shows. So I was asked to design an Invader Zim miniature golf hole, and that was it. And the funny thing is, it almost got made at the very last minute. They wound up, I guess, deciding not to do the mini golf holes again, which is a real shame. But I remember I went to some warehouse where they were building it, and me and Jonan and a couple others were sent over to look at this giant Invader Zim styrofoam head that they were going to use as the mold, and they were carving it out of there, and I was sent to look at it and make sure it was on model. And the funny thing is, it's very, very similar to what wound up being the 3D model for Zim's head. Because make no mistake. Sorry, 1 second. One of the things that wound up coming out was that the Jonan design style was much trickier than any of us had originally thought when we started on the show. I got as close to it as anybody had gotten up to that point. But once the show really geared up, it became very, very apparent that Aaron Alexovich was much, much, much better at it than I was. And he just had kind of I had a natural affinity for, capturing Jonan's essence in the designs, but Aaron really just nailed it every single time. And it just became apparent, especially because, as I said, I was getting distracted, whereas Aaron, swell guy that he is, was always completely and 100% focused. And Aaron Alexovich, by the way, does a comic called Serenity Rose, and he does a bunch of other books and stuff. Look him up on the internet, buy all of his stuff. Great guy. But it was just coming out that he was better at it than I was, and now this whole time, by the way, we are all friends. Like and in fact, one of the things that would happen semi frequently was that we would stay at the studio even after everyone was done working, and this was before um, online gaming, where everyone just had their own usernames, and you could hook up and play with people around the world. You had to literally, if you wanted to play, say, Halo or Quake or something with your friends, you had to hook up your physical machines to each other and either play on a split screen or have several monitors. Well, we would do that at the studio, and the studio would let us. They would let us stay there till all hours of the night, just gaming into the wee hours. And we would all, as a crew, we would do that together. Oh, here's another little fun tidbit. Jonan did these mini comics, the Filler Bunny books, and if you look at which one is this, I think this is Revenge of the Filler Bunny. I think this is number 2. If you look on the back of it, that's me. That's the aforementioned Eric Trueheart. That's Sean Murray, who I worked with at Klasky Chupo, and that's Chris Graham, who I worked with at Klasky Chupo. Those are 3 of my very best friends in the industry. So, so point is, for the most part, we all got along, and we were all really good pals, and we had a good time together. And as a crew and as a production, it was fun, but I could sense tension. Like, I believe there was a tremendous amount of stress and tension because, for one thing, Nickelodeon famously had a lot of problems with the show. They were constantly bugging Jonan about, you can't do this, you can't do that, meanwhile, no getting around it, we had a very sort of subversive attitude about the show, and people wanted to push the envelope, and it worked, and that's one of the things people like about the show. But of course, Nickelodeon was not crazy about that. And you could tell Jonan, and this is just my opinion, I don't think he ever really took all that well to the whole team dynamic thing. I certainly didn't get the impression that he liked all of the, he kept different hours than most people, and so, it was just, I just think there was a lot of tension going on, and it was palpable. And as someone who, like I said, was on the crew but was doing potentially the easiest job of anybody on the show, this was just my observation from the cheap seats. And like I said, I could be 100% wrong, so don't quote me on any of this. But anyway, while all this is going on, it becomes very, very apparent that Aaron Alexovich is better at the job than I am. And then in addition to that, I'm incredibly distracted because I'm literally it takes me 10 minutes to do my character designs, and then I'm working on my pilot for my own show. And again, quite understandably, I think eventually, Jonan and probably others were like, why are we having Fountain spend 10 minutes a day doing character designs and then working on his own show when we've got Aaron, who's actually better than him at it? We don't really need Fountain. So in the nicest, and I really mean this. This is not hyperbole. This is not, this is with 100% sincerity. I say this. Jonan called me into his office one day, and in the nicest way possible, he made it clear that it was probably time for me to go. And because I was so focused on my own stuff, and he had said something along those lines like, look, you seem to have your own stuff going on. We need someone who's committed to this show. And he was 100% right. And now, interestingly, simultaneously, and like I said, I was also doing freelance boards for the 6-pack of the Fairly Odd Parents. So, I was stretching myself too thin. But, not to put too fine a point on it, I was fired from Invader Zim. Now, I say fired, it was really more of a, we're both agreeing that this is, I should probably move on. This is not, I'm not the guy who should be doing this. But it was also around this time that Butch Hartman had started nipping at my heels again, saying, we're going to get a series pickup. We're going to get 24 episodes or 12 episodes or something like that. I am going to need you. And he's like, I will start you out as a storyboard artist, but very shortly thereafter, I will make you a director. And finally, after, having had enough of a break from storyboarding and having, gotten my taste of blood by directing my own cartoon short, the prospect of being a director on The Fairly Odd Parents was looking pretty good to me. So when Jonan called me in and said to me, this probably isn't kind of working out, I was a little bummed that I had let it out that the show was not getting 100% of my attention, because, like I said, I never intended for anybody to notice, and I certainly didn't think anyone would. So that part of it made me sad, but the other part of it was like, all right, this kind of seems like this is good timing. This is probably just kind of how it's supposed to go. So I left the show on the most amiable possible terms. And what's interesting is, for at least a year after I left the show, I would still go, because the shows were split up into different parts of the building. You had Fairly Odd Parents on one side of the building, Invader Zim on the other. For at least a year after that, I would still go over to the Invader Zim side of the building and have lunch and hang out with my friends and all that sort of thing. So, like I said, it was an amiable parting. I was still friends with everybody. But that is how I left Invader Zim. Like I said, you can call it getting fired, you can call it a conscious uncoupling, call it whatever you want. But I had moved on from Invader Zim. Now we would go on to, various members of the Invader Zim crew would wind up. I would wind up getting them hired to be my storyboard artists on The Fairly Odd Parents, and we were all still friends. And in fact, Steve Marmel, who was the co-producer and head writer for The Fairly Odd Parents, he one day threw a very legendary all-night pizza / Halo battle royale at his house, where we all brought our Xboxes over and we all just, like, literally probably 50 people, half from Invader Zim, half from Fairly Odd Parents, and then a few scattered in there from like SpongeBob and a few other shows, but just a huge Halo bash at his house. So point is, we were all still friends. And again, I guess if there's anything to take away from all this, it's that, when you're working on something and you're working with a group of people, the big lesson I learned is that you really do have to be aware and conscious of how other people are doing on the show that you're working on. Like I said, even though I myself had suffered as a storyboard artist, boy, the second I got relief from that, I feel like I became insensitive to those who were still suffering as storyboard artists. And that's the thing. When you're part of a crew, you are part of a crew, and you should be sensitive to what your various crew members are going through. And I've always had a saying when it comes to animation, that everybody in animation has the same job: make the next person's job easier. That way, we're all making each other's jobs easier, and we're all having a much better time. So, I don't know. In as much as I can think of it, that was my experience on Invader Zim. I'm quite certain that this will not be the last video I do about Invader Zim. There will probably be others. I hope I covered everything, but if I didn't, please leave your comments below and ask your questions, and I'll, maybe I'll do a follow-up video answering whatever questions you may have. But I think that kind of wraps up this edition of F-Bombs. Let me remind you again, please, 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 watch our stuff. Watch these videos, watch the teasers, watch the cartoons that we put out. Please support the channel, hit like, share, and subscribe. Talk about us on social media. Shoot me DMs or whatever you want on social media, and let me know if you want more of these videos or what you want these videos to be more about. I do promise that as we get closer and closer to premiering our original cartoons, we will be offering behind the scenes looks at that. And by the way, if you're interested in stuff like that, we put a podcast up on this channel called Chasing the Nightmare, and that's where it's a podcast featuring everyone but me who's working at Fountains Pen Productions making these cartoons. So give that a listen. Follow me on X, Fountain Cartoons. Subscribe to the channel. We're on Instagram. We're on absolutely everything. So please, please, please just support the channel and support these videos so that we can continue to make free cartoons for you. And I got to tell you, I'm coordinating all this through a Discord server that acts as our little virtual studio. And every time I go on there and every time I see the stuff that everyone is working on and everyone is creating, I think you guys are going to be blown away by this stuff. And what's amazing about it is for most of the people working on these cartoons, for just about everyone, this is their first practical experience in making a cartoon. And the fact that they're creating such amazing stuff is nothing shy of mind-blowing. So I wish you could see what I've seen, but on the other hand, I can't wait to sort of blow your minds. So that's it for me. Thank you for tuning in. Like I said, please hit like, share, and subscribe. Tell all your friends about this channel. And until next time, zigga zigga, party people.